Welcome to the Last Beer Show.
Hey, Wayne.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Good, doing well. How about yourself?
I am splendid, sir.
Good. How was your week?
My week was bumpy. It was a bumpy ride. I'm not going to lie. It was a rough week. But we got through it, and I'm sitting down enjoying a cold beer. And I have incredibly good company, so there are worse places to be.
Yeah, I am exactly in your same boat. I too had a pretty rocky, bumpy week, but I'm now sitting down drinking a fresh Oscar Blues Death by Coconut Irish Porter, which is one of my favorite beers out there.
Delicious. I've had it. I've sought it out many years. Well, not many, a few.
Yeah, it's one of those beers that kind of comes and it gets dropped off by the stork, and then it's gone for a year, and then you're pining for it until the next year. It's it's definitely not for everybody. If you're not a huge coconut fan, you probably wouldn't like it. But this is one of those beers that just hits me at the right point at this time of the year every year. Right when it starts to get kind of cool outside, I start to think more about porters and stouts. Mm-hmm. And the Death by Coconut is like this happy medium. It's like it's still hanging on to a little bit of summer with the coconut, but then it's deep diving in with the thick Irish porter.
Coconut is so good in beer. I don't know why there isn't like a summer coconut. Maybe there is and I haven't seen it. But some sort of coconut flavored session, because we have all these summer beverages, especially from a mixed drink standpoint, that are coconut based. What the hell is going on there?
I brewed one a couple of years ago. I brewed one. I called it Pina Atlanta. It was a toasted coconut and pineapple wheat ale that I toasted the coconut in the oven and added it to secondary, and then just kind of let it steep in the beer for a couple of weeks, and incredibly delicious. But one of my favorite beers of all time is Funky Buddha out of Florida's Last Snow, which is a coconut and coffee porter. And it's a porter with coconut, coffee. It's got some chocolate notes in it, and incredibly delicious beer. It comes out around this time of the year every year, and I usually try to scoop up as many of them as I can. But Funky Buddha's Last Snow is a great beer. It tastes like an Almond Joy, honestly. And then also there's another brewer that's got a really good one called Prince Gary Loves the Cocoa. And Prince Gary Loves the Cocoa is an incredibly funny name for a beer, but that is a beer from a brewer in Florida called Civil Society Brewing. And this beer is 7.5% alcohol. Super limited release. I happened to get my hands on a growler of it. Incredibly tasty. I actually thought it was better than Last Snow. So definitely the coconut stout, coconut porters are hitting right now.
You're in a big week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's keep talking stouts. I'm drinking the North Coast Brewing barrel-aged Old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout. It is fantastic.
Yeah, that's a classic beer that doesn't really get a lot of. It's kind of underrated.
I would agree with that. I'm loving it. I've got just over a pint. It's 11%. So by the time we're done here, I may be making more speech errors.
Yeah. I feel like North Coast Brewing is just one of those really consistent brewers. They've been brewing since 1988, but they just put out really good, consistent beers. You just don't really hear a lot about them. But that Old Rasputin set, especially the barrel-aged Old Rasputin set, is just a really, really good beer.
Yeah, I think it's delicious. I'm having a blast with it.
Yeah, so stouts are definitely in session right now.
That's what I want to talk about.
What's that?
Let's go. Craft Beer 101. Let's talk stouts.
Yeah, let's talk stouts. So, one of the first craft beers that I kind of got pumped about, that I got jazzed about in craft beer in general, which, some people may now consider that craft beer, but one of the first beers that kind of got me into craft beer as a gateway was Guinness. And, Guinness is a good traditional stout. I love the story behind how the stout was created, but it's just a great example of what a stout is. It's creamy, it's thick, it's chocolatey, it's got a nice head. You can sit on it for a while. That to me is like, especially like I said, as it gets cooler and the temperatures kind of drop, that's exactly what I'm looking for, and right. Stouts are in session.
Yeah, I came into stouts by way of Guinness as well. It's just one of those accessible, flavorful beers where even 20, 25 years ago, when finding craft beer or beer with a lot of flavor was rare or difficult, Guinness was there and it was available. You had Beck's, you had maybe the local brewery, and then you had Guinness or Heineken. Those were like your choices. Or you could go with a really, really light lager. So yeah, I came into craft beer and the realization of how good beer could be when I lived in Germany, when I was in the service in the early 90s. And the beer was phenomenal. But they have a black beer there called a Schwarzbier, which is a light lager. Even though it's dark in color, it's delicious. It has a fantastic flavor to it. And then Rausch beers, which is also a very dark beer, probably closer to a porter from a malt standpoint, but definitely a darker beer. So when I got my hands on a Guinness, yeah, it was kind of over from there. But it very quickly got into a lot of the other stouts I could get my hands on. They don't make it anymore, although I think it's making a comeback, is Sweetwater's Exodus Porter. Mm-hmm. Why that was ever put to bed, I have no idea, because it is delicious. And the Festives and some of the other ones that are more of the winter warmers. Because from a flavor standpoint, like you mentioned about coconut, there's so much that can be done inside of a stout from a flavor standpoint, whether it's Mexican cake, or if it's making it spicy, or if it's making it peanut buttery, or if it's making it just full of different fruits like cherries and stuff. Like, there's so much that can be done inside of a stout that is entirely different than what you would do inside of a pale ale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of like coffee. Coffee is one of those things that
I love coffee stouts.
It's coffee stouts and coffee porters, just in general. But I think that one of my favorite all-time stouts, which is Firestone Walker's Velvet Merkin, is just a classic oatmeal stout. They've been making it since 2013. I'm sitting on a 4-year vertical of it right now that I'm going to open up here soon.
Wow! Wow!
But it's a bourbon barrel-aged oatmeal stout. It sits at somewhere around 8.5% alcohol, so it's not too boozy. It's very accessible. And then you start to think about from there, like the classic oatmeal stouts. Like you said, you start to go into those kind of Hunapu, the chili pepper, perennials, Abraxas. There's any number of things that you can do with stouts and go from there. So Dark Lord from Three Floyds.
And as soon as the weather starts turning, I start going to the dark beers.
Yeah.
Like as soon as we have a few cool days, is instantly Palo Santo and some of these dark beers that are like my go-to cold weather, sitting by the fire. It's that roastiness, that smokiness, the sweetness of the chocolate, but yet it's dry, it's hoppy. Like getting into the ingredients a little bit and why stouts are black versus, say, the golden colors of a lot of pale ales. Why don't you talk a little bit about the base ingredients that make a stout a stout?
So a lot of the base ingredients of stouts and porters are similar. The things that make it different are, of course, different grains. One of the things that you'll see in these oatmeal sweet stouts, or as they're called, cream stouts, is the use of milk or lactose. But usually what you're seeing are you're seeing dark toasted kind of grains. You're seeing toasted malts, very low on the hops, kind of roasted malt flavor, and then of course, like any of those grains that provide that kind of chocolate back end, that's what you see. So roasted barley, roasted malts, and that roasted flavor, gently roasted, not over roasted, because you don't want that kind of dark, bitter charcoal.
You don't want it to taste burnt.
No, you don't want it to taste burnt, but you want that nice, like sweet kind of roasted caramel flavor. Right. Those are the things that to me really, really set a stout or a porter apart. It's that sweet roasted note, which gives you caramel, coffee, chocolate naturally. One of the things that you don't really think about is, when you drink some of these stouts, like, even some of these oatmeal porters, is that all of those flavors are just natural. It's not like they're adding additional flavor to it. So when you taste an oatmeal stout and it tastes like chocolate and oatmeal and coffee, it's just natural. It's just from the grains and how they were roasted.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point. That was one of the things I was kind of sitting on here. Was I actually have had that come up in conversation before, where people were like, how do they add the chocolate? Or how do they add the coffee to the beer? And you have to explain to them, well, actually, there's none. There's none chocolate in that beer. All they did was roast the grains before they brewed with it, before they steeped it in the water and started firing up a wort. So.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, coming out of the coffee industry, it reminds me a lot of the similarity of coffee. You drink a nice natural processed African coffee that tastes like blueberries, cherries, and strawberries, and you wonder, a lot of folks wonder, hey, how do they add that fruit flavor in there? Well, it's just natural. It's just how the cherries were processed and how the coffee was roasted. And the same way, you can get that roasted caramel or roasted chocolate note out of coffee just through the way that you roast the coffee itself.
Right. Oh, man. I'd love to talk coffee with you one day. I am enjoying a fantastic bag from Brazil of single origin coffee. That different show. I get it. Different show.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about social trends. This is something that in episode 1 we didn't speak about deliberately, but it really wound up being something of a trend or a theme. I want to say a theme of the episode was a lot of the social trends and some of the kindness that you mentioned with some of the bars you had visited out west. And I think there's an opportunity here to talk about what we're seeing happening from a social trend standpoint, because I think it changes. I think it's always changing, whether it's beer dinners or if it's, for instance, let me say this, cellar flights are trending bigly. Like they're everywhere now.
Yeah, hugely.
You can't go to a bar anywhere in town without bumping into cellar flights. I had a really great one at Brick Store here in Atlanta just 2 weeks ago. And I bumped into another one at the Porter Beer Bar. And it's just like, it seems like it's a thing where, okay, everybody's starting to save these beers. We've got an abundance of these cases of these things. Maybe they're all selling. Maybe they're all not. Maybe they're setting aside some of the bottles and doing it on purpose and they have a plan. I don't know. I'm not a beer cellar curation expert. But I do think that that's one of the social trends that I've been seeing.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we are really blessed to be in a city with two of the best beer bars in the country with the Porter and Brick Store. But I think that's a trend that you're seeing really nationwide, and that is that you have a lot of these people who are really, really passionate about craft beer running these programs. And so they're doing things that are special for people because they really like the idea of it themselves. So you're seeing some of these owners and some of these managers of these craft beer pubs holding back these bottles for the sake of putting together really special experiences. And I think that's where craft beer kind of has a differentiator between big beer and craft beer, is that, craft beer is very much about the experience of it. It's not just about the drinking of it. I try to explain that to, other folks that, unlike big beer, one of the purposes of drinking craft beer is that you enjoy it and not get drunk, versus the other, which is, you drinking it mainly to get drunk.
Frat party, woo!
Exactly. And that whole idea is that craft beer is part of the experience of just like sitting and sharing a nice bottle of craft beer with somebody. And so you're seeing a lot of beer pubs really trying to provide more of those experiences of craft beer.
Yeah, I just had a thought. Maybe I'm crazy, but they've had tastings for years at a lot of bars and restaurants where you can get a sampler and they've got the shorties. And you can get 5 or 6 different tastes of different beers, and it's kind of like the same concept. Only these are beers that have been cellared, and now they're planning it, and now they're pairing it with food, and now they're putting it on for a special event where they're now going to tear through tons of these cellared bottles that they've set aside for years, rather than bleeding them, a few bottles a day or a week or whatever it winds up being. Now they're just going to have an event where it's like our cellar day or a cellar dinner or stuff like that, which is these events. It's just such a cool thing that you can't get to every day. And these are things that you can do all the time. They're not even available. So then people plan for it. They schedule it. They see it come through in their Instagram, on the Facebook page. And then they say, oh, I want to go out of my way to go there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it started with flights, and flights in general are a really good thing. Some of my favorite experiences at craft beer places have just been in getting a flight and enjoying a flight of beers. I was at a brewery in Anderson, South Carolina, a couple of weeks ago, Carolina Barn House, and they do sours. They use a lot of local ingredients. They're an incredible brewer up in Anderson, South Carolina, but I just got a flight of their beers because, what better way than to try as many of their beers as possible. And, taking it from there and saying, okay, well, where do we go from there? A lot of these brew pubs and beer bars understand that a lot of their audience have had these beers before, right? They've had whatever beers that you've had on tap before, but you probably have not had a 2010 Sticky Monkey from Firestone Walker, or a 2008 Bourbon County Stout from Goose Island, or so creating those experiences to keep people jazzed about coming in. And then also just the experience of it in terms of like, usually what happens is, and I see it all the time, is that, a lot of my friends are going to this as just a way to connect and to stay connected with their friends and the folks that are in our little niche industry. And so it's more of a community thing than just the beer. It's more of a gathering around the common theme, which is craft beer. So, these craft beer bars are providing an experience that, again, you just can't get everywhere. And so for that, there's much kudos. They're moving the ball forward for craft beer in general.
Yeah, and that's such cool events, certainly from a social standpoint. You meet the coolest people and you talk about the coolest things. It's a conversation starter, and everybody's coming from a place where they coming from the same place, I guess is what I want to say. Like, they're all coming from an area of agreement on basically how good this stuff is or how much they're enjoying it, whether they agree or disagree, and that's fine. But, at least they're not talking politics, getting people together to talk about music, and Nickelback. It's more like more of a theme. So, it reminds me of something that one of my favorite things to do from a cellar standpoint is to get an old bottle. a cellar bottle of something and a new bottle, and then do a taste test. I do that a lot. And I've even mixed them and made a blend. So like you get like a 2008 St. Bernardus Ap 12, and you get a brand new bottle of St. Bernardus Ap 12. And then it's good to share. That way you're not consuming 2 bottles of beer at once, which is a bad idea. Drive safe.
Bad idea.
Drive safe.
Yep.
But usually I'll go somewhere with a friend and then say, give us a 2008 bottle, give us a brand new bottle. And then, 2008, it's an 8-year-old bottle of beer. It's delicious. It's going to be amazing. But it's going to be extremely sweet, caramelized. It is not going to be as acidic, and it's certainly not going to be quite as carbonated as the new bottle, right? It's not going to have that fresh, that zest, that pop that those things have. When you first take a sip, it's not going to tip your nose or anything funny like that. So you have one bottle and the other bottle, and then you split it each, and then you do a taste test, and you see over time. Now, I've built my own flights that way, but just by give me every 2 years or something like that in that bottle. And they'll bring it out. There are a couple of bars in the area that really do a good job of that. But it's really a fantastic way to see how that beer has changed over time. Now, I'm sure in general, when it was in 2008, it probably tasted slightly different than the brand new bottle does. But at least it's close enough, and it's a good enough benchmark for you to say that's kind of a cool thing. And then when you mix the two together, you put some of each in one small glass and like a shorty, and then have a sip of that and then see like what the blend tastes like. That's always fun too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in San Francisco last month, and the best kind of craft beer store in San Francisco, which is City Beer, they have an amazing cellar that they have there that you can buy bottles from. I picked up a bottle of Cantillon's Classic Goose, and you can buy these cellared bottles for purchase for drinking there. And they have a lot of those different kind of verticals that you can choose from.
So you can't take it out?
You can't take it out. You can only drink those bottles there.
Because that's weird, because after a certain amount of time, you probably legally can't sell it, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the legality is. I just know that
state's probably different.
That it's part of their cellar program. They have them kind of, in a cooler, but you can't take them, like you couldn't buy the bottle to take with you. And they had Cantillon Fufun, and they had Lou Pepe, and these amazing bottles of Cantillon that I would have loved to have taken a couple bottles home, but you could only drink them there. And but the joy is that they allow you the ability to try some of those different bottles with different ages on them, and and that's fascinating. It is fascinating seeing how beers age. My cousin, who owns a brewery in Charlotte, and this is not a promotional thing, but my cousin owns a brewery in Charlotte called Unknown Brewing, and they have a beer that they produce, which was their anniversary beer. It was originally going to be called One to promote their first anniversary, but after a year, they wanted to bottle it up. They tried it, and it just wasn't really ready. It's a barrel-aged beer.
I thought you were going to tell me they were going to call it One, but they got a letter from Metallica.
Yeah, now they got a letter from U2, and they said, "Hey, we've already done that." But they decided that that beer needed to sit for a little bit more, so they let it sit for another 6 months. And after 6 months, it was pretty spot on to what they were looking for. So they released it and renamed it 1.5. And just recently, they released 2.5, which of course celebrated their 2.5 anniversary. But I had their 1.5 bottle right after it was released, and it was good. Again, it's my cousin's brewery, so
yeah, tread lightly.
Tread lightly, but it was good. I wouldn't say it was phenomenal, but I had that same beer about 3 months ago after it had aged for a year, and it was incredible. Just like sweet cherries and molasses, and
so was it big? Was it a big beer?
It's a big beer, yeah.
Yeah, it takes time, man.
It's a big beer, but the idea is that, man, just sit on these beers. I remember last year's Bourbon County Stout. I drank a bottle, after I got it, and it was just hot as fire. Just the bourbon in it was just will light you on fire. And I drank a bottle of it a few weeks ago, and honestly, it was like night and day. The difference was absolutely incredible. So some of those beers you just really need to sit on. But I like the idea of blending, like what you talked about. I've started doing that at some shares where, you know, somebody will have a glass of something in it, and I'll open up something else, and I'll just start to pour it in there, and they're like, no, I had something else in there, and I just say, just wait, just trust me.
No, let's talk blends. Let's do it.
You know, that idea of blending is just incredibly fascinating to me too, because, you know, a lot of old school people are like, oh no, you would never mix something else with that. You would never take this Westy 12 and blend it with Bourbon County Stout, right? Because Westy 12 is the world's top ranked beer, and you would never kind of affect that beer in any way.
Right.
But honestly, you know, beer is meant to be drank and enjoyed, and whatever that looks like for you, do it. And sometimes it's good just to experiment and see what different flavors you can get out of blending. And so I'm a huge fan of blending and making my own cuvées, if you will.
I'm all about it. Like I said, and we've talked about this briefly before, is if I've got a really great beer in a growler, and there's only an inch or two left, the next morning, nobody drank it, it's now flat, I don't necessarily want to drink that. But if I've got in the fridge something like maybe the 3 cans from a mix 12 that I was least looking forward to in the grouping, or if I've got some beers that I might just consider like filler beers, some things in the fridge that are just some run-of-the-mill pale ales or something like that. Like, you can really bring a big crafty beer and not waste it. You could really bring that to life by adding in something that is good quality, but also maybe not unique, right? A solid pale ale, or if you've got a bunch of a really extreme like sour, right? Or if you've got any kind of fruit beer or anything, and it's just you want to salvage the remainder of a growler, mixing it with a pale ale or a stout or whatever you've got in the refrigerator or on your shelf that you can revive that beer with, and you create all these really cool flavor profiles that you weren't expecting. And sometimes it can be done within the mix 12. Like, if you've got a mix 12 or if you've got some things just in the back of your refrigerator that somebody left after a party, and you've got a Randall Jr. hanging around like I do, because I don't know, I've just got to be that big of a nerd. So I've got a Randall Jr. and someone will leave a PBR at the house, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that. I'm going to stick a sprig of rosemary from the garden in there. I'm going to stick a piece of bacon. I'm going to leave it in there for half the day, right? But it's going to go flat because after an hour or so, I mean, Randall's not like airtight. So what you're going to do, so you take that and now it's infused with bacon and rosemary, and it's not going to be great, but then you mix it in, you know, in a larger glass with, say, half of a half decent stout, like a really. So you put a good stout in there, like maybe a good, not a great one, but you would mix in, like, say, an Old Chub or a Guinness or something like that, and put in a bunch of that PBR that is infused with the bacon and the rosemary, and dude, you are on to something really spectacular. Excuse me. This old Rasputin is working.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the types of beers that makes this a lot more easily accessible are just fruited beers and sours in general. Because, you know, I'm looking at a beer right now that I picked up in North Carolina, which is one of the best beers I've had in a long time, actually. It is this blackberry and lavender beer from Scratch Brewing. And
save me one of those.
Yeah, this beer is absolutely phenomenal. I think it's ranked 4.5 out of 5 stars on Untapped with thousands of reviews. But this blackberry and lavender from Scratch Brewing is literally, it's blackberry and lavender. It's brewed without hops. It's brewed with their own wild house mixed culture. And I would blend this beer with any stout, porter, IPA, pale ale out there and still get something that was spectacular.
That's pretty diverse.
It's a pretty diverse beer, and that's the thing is that, you know, even when I think of some of the beers that I really just that I've found really interesting over the years, Goose Island makes a coffee IPA that I really enjoy called Fulton Street Blend, and it's a coffee pale ale. I think you can only buy it in Chicago. It uses Intelligentsia Coffee, which is obviously one of the best coffee roasters in the world. And, I think about coffee pale ale. I think about, I was actually a part of helping create a coffee IPA with Monday Night Brewing called Bedhead, which they put out every year now with Batdorf and Bronson. But, the whole idea of that coffee IPA was taking two different styles and kind of manipulating them so that, you did something a little different. You wouldn't have thought, when you think of adding coffee to a beer, you think of like stout or porter, but you wouldn't have thought about an IPA or a pale ale. But yet when you drink that beer, it's an incredible beer. And I think that things like coffee, chocolate, fruits, those sort of things, those can be blended with any types of beer, really.
You can make like beer mixed drinks. I mean, you already cook with it. You got the chick can, that little frame thing you put a can in, and you impale the chicken down on it and stick it in the oven.
Yep, that's right.
I've done that with not Budweisers, and it turns out really great.
Yeah, beer can chicken.
I want to talk about and continue talking about navigating big craft, because I've had several people bring this up to me, and we've talked about this, where they don't know which breweries or which beers on the shelf, especially in a grocery store where the war is on for shelf space. They don't know which ones are owned by InBev or Miller or Heineken or any of these humongous conglomerates. That isn't to say that some of the breweries that have been bought by them aren't making good beer. That is definitely not true. But some people may feel, or have conveyed to me, that they feel like they don't want to give their money to that corporation. They'd rather keep it local or keep it a little more, holistically toward craft.
That's a very interesting conversation. I've had that conversation quite a bit recently with the recent acquiring of Terrapin, which is, obviously a local brewer for us in Atlanta. Terrapin was bought by Miller Coors and is putting a brew pub in at the new Atlanta Braves baseball stadium, SunTrust Park. Miller Coors had the contract for that SunTrust Park, and as such, after purchasing Terrapin, they decided to make that brew pub, which they're going to be actually brewing and creating different beers out of that pub. They decided to make that a Terrapin beer. So I've actually heard that conversation a lot recently with the acquisition of Terrapin. Cigar City is another one that's been really big. And those are all really complicated, and they're really complicated because they're all structured really differently, and they're all kind of very unique situations. So when you think of Terrapin, the conflicted thing that I find with Terrapin is that, and I have a friend, Lauren, whose husband James is a brewer for Terrapin. I've got another friend, Catherine, who works at Terrapin. Tell
your story, but I want to be careful. The people that work at these companies that wind up finding themselves working for these gigantic corporations, they're still really great people. Like the people at Eliason, the people at Goose Island, the people at Ballast Point, people at Lagunitas. They're still making good beer, and they're still good people.
Yeah, that's kind of the point that I want to make too, is that, those people didn't change, and those people got into craft beer because they were genuinely passionate about craft beer. And that didn't change because they got bought by Miller Coors. Those people are still the same people. When I think of, like I said, when I think of Terrapin, I myself might not necessarily, agree with it, and I might not necessarily decide to support it because it's owned by Big Beer now. But at the same time, you can't dispute the fact that those folks are still the same folks, and they're still passionate about what they do, and they're still doing what they do on a regular basis. Now, again, that looks different for different breweries. I know that Goose Island's arrangement with AmBev is a different arrangement. A lot of their beers are now brewed in other states. Their biggest beers are now brewed in other states. You can find their Honkers Ale and their 312. Those are pretty moderate blah beers, but
I still have those. But I'll dig out a Matilda.
Yeah, Matilda, or even their Bourbon County stouts when they're not infected are really good, beers. And so
Sick bird.
I think, and keep in mind that they actually, if you understand what they did this year to fix that problem of the infections, they're actually now pasteurizing all of those beers before they're sold, and that problem will be gone away. It's really hard when you have that a barreling program that's that size to not have some issue at some point. I guess the thing that people were frustrated about is, hey, they went out of their comfort zone in buying a beer from Big Beer with it being Goose Island. And then for it to be infected on top of it was just an extra kind of punch to the gut, and rightfully so, but they took steps to make sure that didn't happen again. But what I would say about, breweries like Terrapin or breweries like, Cigar City, Victory was purchased. I think Southern Tier was purchased as well. The thing
Yes.
that you still see with those is that by and large they still brew things the exact same way, and I think that with the kind of the United Craft Brews organization that Cigar City and Oscar Blues are a part of, Stone has started that True Craft Investment Fund, which is meant to keep people from having to be purchased by these mega conglomerates. I think that you're starting to see folks trying to figure out another way. Terrapin was kind of in a position, in a sense, that they had already sold a percentage of their brewery to Miller Coors anyway. They had already owned a minority stake since 2012, so they kind of were headed in that direction anyway. But my friends that work there haven't changed. The beers have changed in the sense that they're trying a lot of new beers. I noticed that their pumpkin ale had cranberries this year. They're getting ready to release another one this week that's just a different beer for them. I think it means that for them, they get to try a lot of different beers that they weren't able to try before. But I think ultimately it just comes down to you having some responsibility to find out about the brewers that you're buying from. And, for me, that means that I probably wouldn't buy a beer like, Elysian, for instance, or really Goose Island. I kind of rarely buy Goose Island anyway, but now definitely, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't buy their stuff now. Another one would be Ballast Point. Like, I used to really like some of their beers, but now it's like all of a sudden the pineapple in the pineapple IPA, it just tastes fake.
Well, they did the Watermelon Dorado, which was one of the worst beers I've had in a long time.
Yeah, in a long time.
And they're basically trying to run this Sculpin thing into the ground, with all of these different additions. And yeah, you're right. But I think that, again, what makes these situations challenging is that there are people involved in there, and sometimes we're connected to some of these people, and we have to think about the fact that, craft beer isn't just craft beer, it's people. And so how do we do the best job we can taking care of, respecting the people behind those beers?
Absolutely agree. That's why when it comes to navigating big craft, when you're standing in the grocery store or you're in the bottle store and you're trying to consider what to get and you're looking at some of these selections, definitely when the selection is as small as it is in a grocery store, watch what a brewery does. Not what they say, not what you heard, watch what they do. Because you can see in patterns whether or not they're producing more beer or if they're just producing more of the same. And then you can start to get some insight into what the intentions of the purchase were, like what they were trying to do. Whereas like Lagunitas is doing a lot less experimental beer, it seems, but their stuff now, the Little Something, and a lot of these, like, they're popping up everywhere in places they didn't used to be, which is good for them. Well, not them, they totally sold out, but there are other ones like that are taking advantage of the marketplace and the identity, like Ballast Point is. in just doubling down in variety. And they might not be doing it at scale with the utmost care for the quality of what they're putting out. So by watching what the breweries do over time, you can get a taste for whether or not you're comfortable, get an idea for whether or not you're comfortable with how they're doing it, why they're doing it, what they're doing, and whether or not you're okay with it.
Absolutely. I think that, again, it just comes down to your own personal responsibility for doing a little bit of research on the back end, whether it's beer or coffee or meat or whatever it is. Just kind of know a little bit about the folks that you're buying that stuff from. It can be really difficult, especially with craft beer. I know that there's a lot of, you can start with Blue Moon, for instance. For the longest time, and this is something that's been debated in the court of law, it was actually overturned this year, was the definition of craft beer, because someone actually brought it to the court that
Right.
Miller Coors using craft beer to talk about Blue Moon is not accurate because they don't really fit the description of what craft beer is.
Right.
But I didn't know that Blue Moon wasn't a craft brewery. So you kind of have to do a little bit more research to find out about some of these breweries. Second Shift, I think, is another one. And, there's all these brewers that you would find on a grocery store shelf that
What's
are...
that diesel something or other, that like fake steampunk, those cans, it's on all that. I know that. I know that's like InBev or something like that. I ain't buying it.
Shock Top, it goes on and on and on. I just think
that's
that...
InBev. But I think you've just got to, the trend, and we talked about this a little bit last episode, the trend to becoming more and more localized is going to grow. I think as anxiety grows around navigating what is big craft and having an understanding of what that is, if that becomes too much work, and it probably will, people will just get more and more localized.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, fresh beer is best anyway. So the freshest that you can get that beer, unless it's a barrel aged beer, is a good trend. And honestly, if you think about it, all these brewers that are local, all these local brewers, and I think about, we have some really just amazing local craft breweries here in Atlanta. But if you think about what kind of just amazing culture and investments they make into our cities, you want to support those guys because they are creating really cool spaces for us as a community.
Absolutely. What blew my mind, like I said, I got to know good beer in Germany about 25 years ago when I was in the service. And what was interesting to me is I got to know it there because when I got there, I was 20 years old. I just turned 20. I was below the drinking age here in the States. So I was in a bar and you're able to drink. Oh, give me, I can order out of this beer because the drinking age is 16. But what I didn't realize until I got back to the States was that you order by style. Like when you go into a bar, a pub, a brew house, a Gasthaus, whatever these places are, you say, I want a Pilsner. I want a Hefeweizen. I want an ale. I want a Dunkelweiss. And they just give you one. Like you don't care much about brands. Like in the small towns in Germany at the time, they didn't care about brands. If you requested a brand specifically, a lot of the bigger places would have it. But typically you walked in, you sat down, you said, give me a Pilsner. Give me a Hefe. Give me a Dunkel. And they just gave you a beer. And it was delicious. When I got back, you can't really do that. Like in 1995, you walk into a bar and you say to the bartender, give me a Hefeweizen. They're going to look at you cross-eyed. They looked at you cross-eyed. They had no idea, what is a Hefeweizen? What are you talking about? And technically, you could say Blue Moon is in that category, right? It's like, all those wheat beers, what we would call wheat beers in the States, in Germany, it's a Hefeweizen. But what they would say is, you wouldn't order by style in the States. Like even if you went into a really good beer bar here in the States and said, give me a pale ale, give me an IPA, give me a stout, they would be like, okay, which one? We have 30. So you still can't do that. But at some point, there may be bars in the future. A long time ago into the future, there will be bars that will say, I would like a lager. I would like an ale. I would like a Hefeweizen. I would like a wheat beer. I like whatever. And they just give you that one. Because it's all they have is local. All they have is hyper-local beer brewed within a 5 or 10 mile radius.
Yeah, or in the brew pub itself.
I
or
can
there.
dream.
On
I can dream.
Yeah.
And it's fresh. It was brewed like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
What are you going to drink this week? Tell me. What are you going to drink this week?
So I'm headed down to Florida tomorrow for Thanksgiving, and I'm looking forward to it. Yep, road trip. And I'm actually going to be trying to get my hands on a lot of Funky Buddha and Cigar City stuff that I can't get up here. You know, Florida, they don't have a lot of craft breweries down there.
No, I was just going to say, you're going to Panama City Beach?
Yeah, I'm going to Panama City, yeah.
So here's the thing with Panama City is that there aren't a lot of good bottle shops.
Yeah, there's a Wine World, which is a really good shop there, Wine World, and they actually run a craft beer bar next door called Craft Bar, I think.
Dude, you gotta crush it. Dude, you gotta crush it.
I think the last time I was there, they had Dogfish Head Fort on draft, which if you've never had Dogfish Head Fort, it's an 18% raspberry sour.
Very nice.
Which is a phenomenal beer that will knock you on your butt.
Man, those dudes kill it with all their big stuff.
Yeah, they kind of remind me a lot of brewery from California. But there's Wine World, and then there's a couple other places around there. But it's not a huge craft beer area. But again, you can buy Funky Buddha stuff pretty regularly down there. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the stuff that I'm actually taking down there. I'm actually taking some Modern Times. I'm taking some Rare Barrel, some Scratch Brewing, and then some fresh Creature Comforts beers that they've released in the past month, which are Crescendo, which is an amazing IPA, and then Duende, which is an amazing double IPA that they just released. And those guys they're crushing it right now. Creature Comforts is. So I'm going to be taking some bottles down there in case I can't get my hands on some super special stuff. I've got a buddy down there that works for a distributor down there, and he and I usually do a bottle share. And so cool. I'm looking forward to that this week.
Man, that's going to be fun. I think I'm going to go light this weekend. And mind you, I always say that before the weekend, and then the exact opposite happens. But all this reminds me, I've got a bottle of Evil Twins Maple Jesus for you.
Yes.
I
need that.
Have lunch next week. Okay, we got to hook that up.
Yeah, let's do that.
I got to get that over to you. Did I tell you the story? I sent my wife in to get it because I got distracted on the way home from work, and I was going to pop into the bottle shop that had like tweeted on Instagram that they had it, right? And I was like, oh crap, I can't make it. So I sent Katie because she was in the area. She texted me, oh, I'm nearby. So I sent her in, and she said, anything else you want? And this is what I said to her. I said, yes. Ask the guy if he has any whales.
And
she literally said that. She literally asked him that. And he was like, of course, he's a smart guy. He's like, oh, that could be anything. And of course, it's Alead Decatur. They have like so many things that people would consider whales, especially on the West Coast, right? So I feel a little bad, or at least I felt a little bad for about 5 minutes, and then I was totally over it because I had a bunch of really good bottles of beer that she had brought home, and she did a fantastic job of shopping for beer.
Nice.
So she got the Maple Jesus bottles for us, this old Rasputin, and a few other bottles. I felt bad for 5 minutes, and I made her say that, but it was so worth it because the look on her face was just priceless. So this week I have several IPAs I want to work through that I don't want to sit to spring. Right? Like when the winter comes, I am all about porters and stouts and some of the festive Christmas and New Year beers that are just really spicy, and they have seasonal spices in them, some nutmegs and a lot of those things. I really want to crush a lot of those things. So this weekend I'm going to kind of get to some of the bottles in the back of the refrigerator, the back of the shelf, the cellar shelf, to get those worked through, the ones that you wouldn't want to wait 6 months for. One day we're going to show video, and I am recording video of all these shows, by the way.
That's good.
And saving it. Now
Good.
people can see all my weird blinks and how much I drink when we're doing this, which is copious. And then your fruity ass dog.
Yeah. Look at that. Come on.
Let's after party. So did you have tire problems this week?
Yeah.
Brakes? Was it the brakes?
Yeah,
I didn't do
brakes.
the brakes on my car and my wife's car. Let me tell you how hard my budget was hit. Incredibly hard.
Yeah, that's so try going into it thinking that you're just going to need pads and then find out you also need rotors, which are $100 a piece.
Yeah.
So that's a good way. That's a good way to break $500 pretty easily and walk away with nothing.
That's a tough afternoon. Yeah, the thing about some of these cars is that it's like, oh, to maintain your warranty, you've got to have this routine service done. And the routine service is hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You're like, oh, God, I got to have to figure that out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's very true. And, it's one of those things that you've got to do it. So it doesn't really, there's nothing you can do about it. But this week I kind of got hit with this, we've had all of this smoke from these wildfires in the North Georgia mountains and North Carolina mountains.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
It's been really, really tough here in the Atlanta area, at least. And I've developed some sort of chest cough, chest infection, coughing that I've had all week. I've tried to work either from home or from the office in a little corner by myself, so I didn't get anyone sick.
What? Dude, I've been coughing for 8 weeks. It is brutal. This is a disaster. My entire fall has been ruined, and I'm going to fire the writer.
Yeah, it's horrible. I'm not okay with this at all. But we're starting to get the cooler temperatures here, and that stuff is, I guess, bound to happen. So
I'm wearing up the mute button here, so I can cough.
That makes two of us.
It's a disaster. Maybe I'll have an update at the after party in the next episode, but it has recently come to my attention that I am about to be employment challenged. So I am definitely pressing hard to figure out next steps on that front. I've made a to-do list. You go through the motions, you line them up, and you knock them down.
That's a horrible place to be, my friend, and I certainly understand completely. But here's the thing: you're incredibly smart and you're incredibly valuable. So I have no doubt that it won't take you very long at all. Plus, you're a networking fiend. So
I hope so. I'm trying. I'm not you. Your article this week on how to be a thought leader was excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a great piece of writing. It was insightful, and while I think everybody reads something, right, and they're coming from their own standpoint, and they may comprehend it a little bit differently. And from me, I'm an old-ass dude, so I was like, oh, yeah, I get all these steps. But it doesn't mean it's easy to do. So you read something like that, and you're like, oh, yeah, there are like 5 times I'm reading that article, right? And there's only 7 paragraphs. And I'm like, 5 times in it, I'm like, yeah, I could be doing a better job of that. Totally. Dude, you got to unmute.
I said that makes 2 of us. The whole idea is just that you figure out what you're really good at, and you let other people know that you're really good at it too. It's about, sometimes you have to toot your own horn.
Well, you don't even have to do that. Like sometimes you can position yourself as an expert in a space just by sharing good things, because you're at least a good sharer. You're a good forwarder of good information. And if you are a harbinger of good information and a conduit to people learning things, then you are at least still valuable. Like that the idea that it has to be your idea is false. I'm not buying that. Like, you can be a good conduit and have value to people.
Yeah, I agree. I will agree with that. I mean, whenever I was first interviewing for my first agency job, one of the guys asked me, he said, what are some things that you do to learn more about your craft? And I said, I spend a lot of time aggregating content and reading it out and sharing it to my audience. Mm-hmm. And he found that incredibly fascinating and was very positive about the fact that I did that. But honestly, I mean, if you think about it, if you read this content and you find it very valuable, there's a pretty good chance that other folks will find it valuable too. And if you suddenly become a resource for that stuff, now all of a sudden you've got some more equity that you didn't have before.
Yeah, I was joking with somebody today, but maybe I need to take the idea a little more seriously. Is like getting a personal intern to just be my social monkey, just like do all the work. And then I can just focus on doing my job all the time. And then I don't have to like stop doing my job in order to tweet something interesting. I'm trying to up my Instagram game. I don't know. Trying.
Yeah. I mean, I need one of those people myself.
We should all just have personal assistants. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a lot. Like, managing a career and a family and a beer podcast and being active on all the social networks and trying to engage with people. Because the thing is, I want to engage with everyone in all these spaces because each space is cool and the conversation happening in each one of them is cool. Although Facebook's not always cool. Hit or miss on the Facebook. But the rest of them, it's always really cool, right? So you're like, oh man, I want to be there. And then I want to try all these new ones like Anchor and all this stuff. And you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm already spread pretty thin.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I was when Google Plus came out. I just said, I mean, I'm already pretty strapped from a social media platform perspective anyway. Right. I really don't need to add another social media platform to my repertoire, whether it's LO or Google Plus, like literally.
Lucky for you, nobody really used it.
Nobody used either one of those really. So,
they're the new Friendster, but they were out of the gate, unlike Friendster.
Yeah, exactly.
MySpace was amazing too, and just got their lunch money taken.
Yep.
All right, anyway, enough about tires and social media. I gotta run. I left my kid downstairs for an hour now while we talked, and she, I promise you, is in her absolute happy place with all the My Little Pony one could possibly handle as an 8-year-old girl. But I'm going to fire up some food, handle that business.
Yeah, do that. I'm gonna do much of that same. I've got a pack for leaving for Florida in the morning, so I got a
road trip.
Bunch of work for myself.
As always, man, it's so good talking to you.
Awesome. Likewise, my friend. Have a great rest of your evening and a great week.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening. You guys can find us all over the socials. Jason is on Instagram @DominiImbibes and on Twitter @JasonDomini. I'm in the Untapped app. Search my name, Wayne Pelletier, and on Twitter @Wayne Pelletier. Also, big ups to the gang at ABV Network. We're really excited to be part of this new network. Be sure to check it out. The Bourbon Show is absolutely on fire. Seth, Steve, and Evan are killing it over there. The show is even better if you're a bourbon drinker. Lastly, we ask that you please consume responsibly. Do not drink and drive.